forward, isn't it?
Thanks to the the context, geographical context, obviously, Canary Islands. Thank you for that. Oliver in Muswell Hill, will MPs claim £4,000 of utility bills on their second home through the expenses system, he asks. Chris says, unlike many other utilities, water is essential for life. How, therefore, is it morally right to make a profit from such a product? Water should be non-profit or renationalised. There does seem that continual drumbeat. But let's come to other matters. And as you've heard on the LBC News Bulletin, student loan interest rates in England and Wales will be cut to protect borrowers from rising inflation rates. This, of course, as we enter this cost of living crisis. The rate will be cut to 6.3% from September. The Department of Education has announced. The government announced in June the student loan interest rate would be reduced from 12% to 7.3%, which is quite a cut. Here with more details, Education Secretary James Cleverly joins me now. Secretary of State, how are you going to make up the loss of finance, the loss of money then? Good morning.
Nick, good morning. Well, one of the things that we know is that the money that is coming in on a daily basis is not actually affected that much by the interest rates. This is about ensuring that we encourage students to take the right choices and to encourage them to go to higher education. And actually, the amount of money coming in won't be affected in the immediate term by that. And so this is about ensuring that, of course, we do fund our globally renowned university sector, that we encourage everybody, including those people from more modest financial means, to go to university and get the right course for them and do so in an economically sustainable way.
If we take one step back, though, Secretary of State, why are we charging this mostly young people 6.3%? I can get a mortgage at 2.5%. Why are we making money out of them at all?
Well, we've got to ensure that we have a predictable and sustainable funding stream for universities.
Well, I think Nationwide and Barclays manage that respectfully, Secretary of State, with their mortgages. I put it to you again. Why is the government charging mostly kids 6.3% when I can get a mortgage for actually more money, 2.5%? Why are you making money out of young people?
Well, mortgages on a tangible asset like a property or business equipment is a very, very different type of financial product to something like a student loan.
But if Barclays or NatWest can do it, the British government can do it. You're still making money out of these kids.
Well, people aren't houses, Nick. People aren't houses. It's a fundamentally different type of financial product, and comparing those two is, I think, a bit of an unfair comparison.
Why?
But the broad point is
the cost of money is the cost of money.
We want to make sure. No, the cost of money on tangible assets is always cheaper than intangibles. You know that. Now, the point is, we want to make sure that we have a well-funded, world-class higher education sector. We want to make sure that everything from vocational training to the most traditional degrees are well funded. It is a sector that we are incredibly proud of, and we want to make sure that it is on a sustainable long-term economic footing, whilst also ensuring everybody is encouraged to do the right course at the right institution.
Couple of other matters to raise with you as Education Secretary, so let's go straight on to those. I hope you or one of your colleagues has had sight of the Times. They have a special investigation, universities blacklisting so-called harmful literature. Secretary of State, do you think there should be a trigger warning, a content warning on the Bible?
I saw this headline. I'm going to, when I go back to the office after this interview, I want to get a bit more detail on that, because I want to understand really what's going on here. I think universities have understandably got a duty to protect the mental health of their students, but they've also got a duty to help them challenge themselves, to help them understand the world as it is, perhaps not just the world as we would like it to be. Some of those titles, yes, they're challenging, yes, they're difficult, but they are also seminal works that need to be read and need to be understood. So instinctively, I am uncomfortable with the idea that there are things which are too challenging for university students to read. And the last time I checked, there's a lot of challenging stuff on the internet. And if we're making it difficult for stuff in print, whilst there's a whole load of stuff online, which is considerably more challenging. I think we're in the risk of tying ourselves up in knots, but I want to have a look at a bit more detail.
Just lastly on this, much of the work is delivered the brutality and horrors of slavery. Trevor Phillips, who I'm sure you know or know of, is concerned about this and says that, in fact, people need to learn. This is almost institutional racism to put trigger warnings on these books. Would you concur, Secretary of State?
I find myself, as I get older and greyer of hair, I find
You're
myself
not
agreeing
getting
with...
greyer. What nonsense.
I find myself
you
agreeing
look a bit like
with
Captain
with
Birdseye
Trevor.
with that beard, actually. I was going to comment on that, but do go on.
I find myself agreeing with him often. And look, it is really important. It is really important that we don't airbrush history, whether it's inconvenient or otherwise. And I think there's a broader point that people have to understand the horror of what happened in the past, the changes that have happened, how things have improved, and what further improvement still needs to be made. And if you're constantly scrubbing what happened in the past, it's really difficult to audit how much progress we've made. So I find myself concurring with him on this issue.
Let's move to the future. You will be aware energy bills for the so-called typical household, you'd be looking at around £4,200 next year. That's going to look at around £355 a month for a typical household. Is it time now for Rishi Sunak to stand down and allow the front-runner Liz Truss to get in and to get on with it?
Well, look, as you know, I've been supporting Liz right from the start on this. I would love it if she stepped into number 10.
I was at Leeds with you, if you recall, a couple of weeks ago,
Indeed,
yeah.
Yes, indeed. And so, I would love it if she could step into number 10 now, but that's not in her gift. The bottom line is that the Chancellor and the Business Secretary have already hauled those energy companies into Whitehall to discuss with them what they're going to do about these unexpected, unforeseen, unprecedented profits.
More windfall taxes, Secretary of State, would you support that?
Well, look, I think what we have to do is we have to look at the full range of how we ease this cost of living. It is not always as simple as taxing and then giving people money to offset the bills. And I know that is a very, very compelling, very, very popular argument. But also what we have to make sure is that we have investment in that domestic energy generation so that we don't find ourselves, as other countries have done, in hock to some totalitarian regimes. Large parts of Europe are really, really struggling because they are so reliant on Russian gas supplies, for example. We want to make sure our energy generation is cheap, that it's renewable. So pushing down on costs is an incredibly important part of it. And of course, Liz has already committed to an emergency budget as soon as we get back in September to address the immediate increase in costs that people will be seeing coming through their bills in October. So both short, medium and long-term action is taken, and Liz is committed to all of those.
Lastly, I don't know whether you're a rugby bloke, Eddie Jones, the England coach, has been rebuked by his bosses at the RFU for criticising private schools making life too easy for its pupils. Is life easy for private school pupils? What are the benefits of a private education in your view?
Well, look, we have a fantastic range of schools. Private schools are an important part of it. Some globally renowned schools in the private school system. I went to a private school. I played rugby. My school's in South East London, which is not, I think, the kind of comfy environment that Eddie was thinking about. But I think it's important that all schools give young people the opportunity to play sport, and properly competitive sport, because that is good preparation, not just for elite sport like he is involved in, but also just life more generally. And that is as true, I think, in state-maintained schools as it is in free schools, academies, or indeed private schools.
Players who were educated privately struggle to become leaders on the pitch, says Mr. Jones. Did you struggle to become a leader?
Well, my rugby career was not quite as glorious as I would have liked.
What position did you play, Mr. Cleverly?
I played loose forward. I remember turning up to Blackheath and saying to the head coach I quite fancied trying out for number 8, and he looked me up and down. You've met me in person.
I have, yes, yeah.
And he looked me up and down. He said, "Yeah, you're a bit on the small side, but let's give you a go." And that's when I realised I was not going to be an elite rugby player.
When I meet you, you're the size of Maro Itoje, so I'm sure it's just down to training. That's all that went wrong. James Cleverly, thank you, appearing Education Secretary, appearing here on LBC. 3 minutes after 8, news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.